Camera.
Hello. How are you?
So Lydia,
Hi.
you're on mute.
Oh
Oh
my
no,
gosh.
No, 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 no,
I
no. She's
am.
not. You're not on mute. You can't. We can't see your
your
face.
camera.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Let me
Just
start my
explain.
camera.
Yes. Start up.
yeah. We
There
want to
you
Please,
see your pretty
are.
please.
face.
Look at you. You
Oh,
have.
thank you. Rocking my pandemic glasses. Like I ran out of contacts a few months into the
Oh,
pandemic, and like
really?
my eye doctor's office was closed, and they would not do an appointment online. So
Yeah.
I ended up
Yeah.
like wearing my glasses every day. Also, do not judge. We have not taken down our Christmas tree.
No,
But I
no,
love it.
no judgment. Look at my
I love it.
laundry in the background.
It's I love that. It's like it's relatable. I don't really believe people who have like these perfect setups behind them. Yeah, no
Yeah.
one
Well,
is that
to
perfect.
me, that setup is perfect. You're all intellectual with your books and your Captain America shield. I love it.
Yeah.
That
My
is
favorite though is the artificial backgrounds where you look like you're in Cancun or something. Those
Yeah,
really
yes.
bother me.
those really look tacky.
Yeah, I taught kids for a while in China, and sometimes they would love to play around with silly backgrounds. They love to be in space. Which, they were not. It would be really, they were not wearing spacesuits. It was not realistic. Um,
I love it. Well, Lydia,
good
aside for
times.
sore eyes, I haven't seen you in about 2 years, I think.
Really?
Right? Since I was in DC.
Yes. Yeah. You
Yeah.
were in DC at one point, and we did I know we did dinner. Wait, it might have been longer than 2 years ago. Is that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah.
What
It's
even
probably
is time
3 now.
anymore?
It's 3. Yeah. But
I remember
yeah,
we had
let's.
a really good Ethiopian dinner.
Oh my goodness. Don't get me started. I miss Ethiopian food so bad. Like
It's the
Nice.
it's better in
best
the
in
East Coast.
DC. It
It's
truly
better
is.
in the East
DC
Yeah,
Coast.
has
there's a lot of
amazing.
things that are better in the East Coast. I know
Right.
there's a huge Ethiopian district on, is it Crenshaw? Crenshaw Boulevard?
Yeah. In Fairfax area,
Yeah, in
it's
Fairfax area.
okay.
It's okay. Okay.
Mm.
I trust your palate. So if you say it's okay,
Yeah.
then obviously it's.
I much prefer what I get in DC and New York, believe it or not. I don't know why it's better there. The bread, maybe, the sponge bread.
Oh,
Makes
so
sense.
good.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
But let's let Jennifer kick this off and do some introductions, and then let's
Yes.
get the show
Yeah.
rolling.
Most
Love it.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, hi there to our audience, and we are visually live as well. We're going to be up on YouTube for this episode, so if you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to thumbs up or like or subscribe to the channel, and that will help our algorithm and help us make more of those pennies that one makes on on social media. My name is Jennifer Oliver O'Connell. I am As the Girl Turns on all social media. And this is the Red Beans and Fried Rice podcast with my co host, Marc Eng of Asian Industry B2B, as well as a million other things. He's a peripatetic little fella. And our guest is Lydia Hall. She is a political strategist, I believe, and a policy wonk, and she does all types of awesome things. So, Lydia, tell us more about yourself.
Sure. So I've worked in the nonprofit space in policy, on Capitol Hill and lobbying. So it's so hard to sum up what I do. Just like Mark, it's so hard to sum up what I do in like a few words, like a title. But in the past year, I sort of struck out on my own professionally about a year ago, and I've been working as a communications and policy consultant. I work with a lot of nonprofits. I do editing. I do research and guidance for people who are looking for advice. Like I do these signature policy roadmaps for people who need to learn a lot about a complex issue in a short amount of time. And yeah, I do a lot of editing work with grad students. It really runs the spectrum. I've done a lot of grant writing as well during the pandemic I mean, obviously there have been tremendous new opportunities as well as organizations having to really be creative and look for additional sources of funding. And it's really led to, I mean, tremendous creativity and resilience among all the challenges that everybody has faced. So the way I like to kind of sum up everything that I do is I tell people that I like to help people. I help to help people tell their stories. I help people use their own words in the best way possible to tell their own narrative. It's not like me coming up with the content. It is me helping place somebody at the center of the narrative and helping them kind of realize the full potential of their words and their story.
And Lydia, you're based in DC, right? So you're in Washington, DC, and most of your clients are pretty much related to politics and government, which is how we became very good friends, right? We went to school at Columbia together, and from there we realized we both had a history and love for politics and government issues and all of that. And even though we're on complete polar opposites of the spectrum, we remain friends and we have a lot of fun conversations.
It's all about, I'm such a big believer in having cross-aisle friendships. I was saying today that what bothers me—
Cross-aisle, I like that, cross-aisle.
Exactly. I mean, what bothers me so much more than like people who don't agree with me is people who are apathetic, people who have no opinion on something. Oh, like, I don't do politics. If you don't do politics, maybe just don't complain about what's happening in society and, let the rest of us who pay attention, who, even if we may disagree on how to fix a problem, we at least are thinking about it. We're at least thinking about solutions. And I just think it's so easy, actually. I mean, okay, I won't say easy because the climate that we're living in is just, it is a little different. But I think that it's very doable to be friends with somebody, to work with somebody productively across the aisle without compromising your own values. Like I am very liberal, but I am happy to find areas where I agree with conservatives. And when I worked on Capitol Hill, I worked for a member of Congress who was a fairly centrist Democrat, and she made every effort to work across the aisle. And it really worked. And, even if the legislation that we worked on together didn't pass, we were at least like having a conversation. We were working productively and cooperatively and proving that you can still find common ground.
So how do you do that? That is my big question. I actually had a conversation with a fellow conservative today, whose sister is a liberal Democrat, and she's just like, I can't talk to her. I try to avoid this conversation and it doesn't work, and I just can't talk to her. How do you have a conversation with someone who is on the other side of the spectrum from you?
So it's not easy, but what you have to do, so I recommend, first of all, taking it to like a relaxed and laid back kind of environment. So Marc and I we met at a pub night when we were starting off our first semester in grad school. And we were just doing like a bar crawl of neighborhood bars around Columbia. And we just got to talking. And I think that we had already had like several drinks by the time naturally, well,
Lydia was doing drugs, but I wasn't. Okay,
excuse me. This took a weird turn into the lies. I was about to say that we had a very
podcast now.
Oh my God, I am not.
Number 13 may be viewing.
No. No one in this situation did drugs. What did happen was that Marc and I, being political people, inevitably obviously brought up politics. I'm the kind of person who it is hard for me to like spend an hour or so with a person and not want to tie it back to politics in some way. It's why I live in DC. It is why I moved where I moved. But Marc and I started
talking. You're originally from Maine, right?
Yes, I grew up in Maine.
Yeah, she grew up in a very rural part of Maine, like a northern near Canada.
Not rural. I'm from the big city of Maine, of not even 100,000 people, Portland, Maine. It is a big city for the area. And my parents moved there because they wanted a laid back environment. They met when they were living in New York, and they wanted a laid back place to raise their kids. And I was such a little nerd when I was a child, and frankly am as an adult as well. Right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't even care.
I love nerds.
I'm not embarrassed by that. I am who I am.
Own it.
But I was like this nerdy child, and I was very shy, but I was always pretty much always willing to talk about politics with people because I found them interesting and I knew that I could talk about it. And I mean, I was like, I would go to the polls with my parents when I was a kid, like go in with them and like watch them fill out their ballot. And I registered to vote like the second that I turned 18, in time to vote for Howard Dean in my local caucus in Maine. I know. I was excited to, I know, I see the look on your face now, Mark.
No, Lydia, I just want to say something before you continue. Did you know that Howard Dean is what got me into politics? So I
No,
don't
I
think I
actually
told you that story.
didn't.
My uncle, right after I graduated from undergrad, invited me. Actually, he hoodwinked me into going into a Howard Dean rally. And when I
Nice.
went there, I was like, I thought I was having dinner with my uncle from New York that I hadn't seen in 12 years. And then I realized it was a Howard Dean rally for Asian Americans for Howard Dean. And I listened for 45 minutes and I was like, oh my God, whatever party this guy is, I'm the opposite. So that's the
so
day
funny.
I became a Republican.
You should tell him that if you ever meet. I loved him so much at the age of 18 and I was very idealistic. Oh my God, the sticking out of the tongue is not necessary. But I was I loved him as a candidate and I voted for him in the local caucus. And I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of like being part of a caucus. It is just democracy in its rawest form.
It sounds like chaos. I know a lot of Democrats are not happy with caucuses. Because
they're not
a lot of people get
enjoyable.
shut out.
I mean, look at what happened in Iowa the last time.
Right.
Exactly. I don't think anyone talk about like agreement on both sides of the aisle, bipartisan agreement. People don't love caucuses. They're not convenient. And I mean, I understand that it is like.
So what do you like about it, Lydia? What do you like about caucuses?
Nothing, pretty much, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very like what I appreciated about it, sort of in retrospect, is the fact that I was seeing like sort of the lowest level of the political system. Here we were voting for a Democratic Party presidential candidate. We were in this fairly small town in Maine, just like 100 or so people, and we were helping make it. We were. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm not good with numbers, and it was a while. I am,
Wasn't that like
I am
a local
not
high
18
school
anymore.
gym?
Literally in a gym, literally in like a high school or middle school gym. You feel like you are seeing like the one small cog in the machine that is American government and American elections. And it was honestly, I am very glad that I did that. And I've never had the pleasure of participating in a caucus since, just because I haven't had the time, and DC does primaries, and I've never lived in a caucus state since. So that was my one chance. And I got to be a delegate to the state's Democratic convention, and where Dennis Kucinich, which is a name that you do not hear a lot anymore, I wonder what he's up to actually, was a speaker. And it was kind of like a moot point because the nominee had already been determined to be John Kerry. Throwing it back to 2004.
How do you feel about that? I feel like, the party knew they wanted Kerry to be the nominee. And so anyone else who supported anyone else was shut out. How do you feel? Because I feel like it's bad in Republican politics, but God, it's worse in Democrat politics.
I mean, both parties have their tendency to like anoint a front runner early. And I don't love that. And that absolutely is what happened in 2004. I remember having so much like righteous indignation on Howard Dean's behalf, actually. Little 18-year-old me. I like debated. Finally, I got my classmates to talk about politics with me, and I was like so excited. But they're like, "Oh my God, you must feel so sad about Howard Dean, don't you?" And I'm like, "Ugh." But I still, I appreciated what, later, like now looking back on it, I do appreciate that my classmates and I were able to have that moment together, that we
And
were
that's a
able to kind
primary
of,
process, right? You
hmm
know, I think that it's very important to have a healthy primary process where as many
oh
people
yeah,
can run as possible,
yep,
and you know, you feel like it's a democracy at that point. But Jennifer, I wanted to bring it over to you. You know, I know you have some experience with some of this, like like caucuses and primaries, and I know you have some thoughts on it. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about it.
I am actually more curious about how, I've never actually experienced a caucus, primaries obviously, but not a caucus. I'm curious, Lydia, why they can't. The element of the caucus that I do like is the fact that you are up close with the candidate.
yeah,
This is part of the problem with our politics, is that in local politics too, it's these big
absolutely,
events, and they can hide. Nobody can pointedly ask them a question, which they should. There are all these manufactured questions from the press, and
absolutely.
I'm press, so I get it. What that aspect of the caucus, how do we bring that into every area of politics, the primaries and the national?
Great question.
That is such a good question. And I mean, I I think a lot of it, honestly, I mean, a lot of it I think is up to the national parties to kind of open things up to more, to host more events. But I think a lot of it also is up to people to, and this is like one thing that I like, having worked in advocacy, having worked with nonprofits, I am very passionate about. Like, I tell people, like, you need to be open about what you want. Like, you need to take the steps to reach out to people. So I do think a lot of it, some of it does kind of need to be up to people to, you know, put themselves out there, to connect with candidates, to speak out on issues that are important to them, and get their attention. But no, I agree that I think there needs to be more to, there need to be fewer fundraisers hosted in wealthy people's homes and
I
more
agree.
public forums, obviously safety permitting. I mean, I understand, like, obviously security is a huge concern, but I think that
Mhm.
forums where people can honestly speak to candidates and ask them the questions that are important to them. I just think more forums like that, and
Yeah.
more like opportunities to interact with people in the community
Mhm.
setting.
So, Lydia, I wanted to jump in on something that I think both Republicans and Democrats can agree on right now. Iowa. Why the heck does Iowa get so much damn attention, and us in the other states get left out in the early part of the process, which is pretty damn important if you
Yeah,
ask me.
Yeah.
it's getting pretty, I agree. I think that it's harder and harder to defend the system that depends on Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina as kind of the kingmaker states. And that's why, in like a way, I have been not heartened, because it was frustrating, but like to see, you know, Super Tuesday being the point when like the candidacies, like
Right,
when people finally started to sort of see who the nominee would be. Like
right.
the fact that, it wasn't like all determined in Iowa.
Mhm.
So how is it for you that when Elizabeth Warren was your candidate, right, for
She
the
was. She
okay,
was.
and so how is that for you when basically she failed, and Biden pretty much, I think, wrapped it up after Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Well, first of all, the reason I love Elizabeth Warren, and I know that, like, what I love about her and why, oh my God, the faces, oh my heavens. You are just, I have been, my facial expressions have been the picture of politeness. No, no, but I loved Elizabeth Warren, because, and the reason I am not a Bernie supporter is because Elizabeth Warren I see as a pragmatist. One thing that I find frustrating on, I mean, actually, and you see this on both sides of the aisle, is people who expect overnight transformation, who, complain a lot, but don't really suggest much of anything. And it's like, okay, I want this policy changed overnight. And it's just not realistic. And as somebody who, I get frustrated with people who have like
Mhm.
never worked in DC before, who've never
I
worked in
agree with that.
politics before. Yeah, people like who've never worked in government or with the government, interacting with it in any way. And like, I mean, yeah, we all, I think, agree that government could be more efficient and that policies could be enacted more swiftly and efficiently, but we're not you cannot change things overnight. And you have to be okay with incremental changes. You have to be okay with accepting small victories when they
I
happen. Like,
agree.
not to go off on a tangent, but DC statehood legislation passed today in the House, and like it's not going to pass the Senate. And people are like, "Oh my God, it's just not worth getting excited over this because, like, this is something that's not ever going to pass." And but I would tell this to people when I worked in lobbying, and when I've helped people out with advocacy strategy, I've said, you know what, like, yeah, chances are the bill probably won't pass that you're advocating for. Most bills don't pass. Most bills don't become law this time around. But what you've done with this, like by, for example, getting someone to introduce a bill for you, is you have advanced the conversation. You have advanced the dialogue. You have helped to move the goalpost forward a little bit. It's just,
Right.
you have to be, I know this is like annoying for people to hear, but you
Mhm.
have to be okay with small victories. And
It's delayed
I think,
gratification. Hmm.
No,
yeah, and it's just you.
it's the Grand Canyon method.
Yeah, yeah, it's playing the
It
long
really
game,
is. And
and
Democrats are very good at that.
yeah,
We give up. The conservatives, Republicans, we give up too easy, as you said, if it's not this big, huge victory. Instead of, no, you start small and you also start local.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
oh,
actually,
like
I want to give.
starting local. The Republicans did that better than the Democrats for years, and I think the Democrats are finally catching up. But I remember I was so bored by local politics. Bad attitude on my part, but I was not excited by local politics until I moved to New York and I got involved with like New York City Democratic politics, which is like all about the neighborhood clubs. And like I was like a local delegate, and I didn't even realize that was possible. But everything, it's all about the local, like hyper local levels. And Democrats, I think figured out after 2010 that they needed to have been doing that. And some states have done it better than others. But it's true. The Republicans, I mean, doing things locally is just something that I think a lot of people forget about, but it is so
We don't
important.
have that here in California, Lydia.
Mhm.
Our local people that are super active are Democrats in California. We have
Yeah.
basically no bench when it comes to local Republicans. So,
Huh.
it's funny that you had that observation and certainly what you said applies for states like Alabama, like Georgia, even, but even that's changed in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
States in the South, but also in the Midwest. I think Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. That's why those eventually flipped and became red states in the presidential election in 2016. They did flip back to Biden, but really with the smallest of margins. So
Yeah. With those, for me, like from what I saw and like knowing people who worked on the campaign more so in 2016 than in 2020, but there were a lot of like from what I heard in 2016, the Republicans did do a better job kind of on the ground, like going door to door and
Yeah.
just
When,
connecting with
when
people in a
we weren't
way.
afraid of the whole, COVID thing.
Well, in 2020, I honestly like don't even get, but in 2016, actually, like I think the Republicans were
yeah,
like did more to connect with people, like in not like, not flashy fundraisers, but with like, visiting people in their homes. Like I'm trying to remember who I spoke with at like we did a lot of post-mortem conversations after the 2016
yeah,
election.
yes.
Yeah.
And I remember one friend of mine saying that she talked to a relative, I think out in Michigan, like rural Michigan somewhere, and the relative had been undecided about who to vote for. And ultimately it came down to like one-on-one interaction, and the Republican candidate happened to be more active in reaching out.
Hmm.
And it was
Yeah.
like a local candidate who came to their home, but it was like enough that this relative like went straight party Republican. And I think that was a lesson though, that the Democrats learned. And obviously with the
Yeah.
pandemic campaigning was very different, but they still, I think, found ways to connect with people and to, like, I did a lot of text banking, for example, and people found a way to, I think they learned that lesson, and that's part of why the election went the way that it did. But yeah,
Yeah, and
local
and I actually
matters.
want to bring up Jennifer and I have a common friend, Carmel Foster, And Carmel actually highlighted the problems with the Hillary campaign in 2016 in Pennsylvania, where she was working. Jennifer, you want to give us a little more color on that? Because I think that's kind of goes with what Lydia was saying.
Yeah, Carmel, she's a South African immigrant. She's a naturalized citizen, and she worked. She's got a bigger backstory if you want to read it at Communities Digital News,
or listen to our episode
Awesome.
1, or listen to our episode 1.
I will have to.
Please do. But also, she worked as a organizer for Hillary's campaign in Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
And sent into the poor areas, obviously, to recruit. And she said the level of voter fraud was just off the charts, where the party was doing things that it shouldn't have done, that Republicans were doing things that shouldn't have happened. But she said nobody listened to her, that they didn't care about the vote. They claim that they are the party of minorities and migrants and immigrants, but when their vote was being compromised because of all this fraud, nobody cared. It very much disheartened her that they give lip service to, we're the inclusive party, we're the ones that, truly care about you, but you don't care about making sure that their vote counts and that it's counted in the proper way.
I think the campaign, unfortunately, was problematic. I mean, it was just, it's like, I honestly hate even looking back on it now. I mean, I think that luckily, the lessons from that campaign were well learned, and well applied. I mean, I think that, it was hard to accept at the time. And I mean, God knows, like, local machine politics in both parties can be very problematic. And, I mean, I've never had any experience with it myself, but I mean, it's just, it's intense, like when it's small groups of people making decisions for larger numbers of people, and they all know each other, and they're hyper competitive, and it just, it can get messy.
Isn't that a pervasive problem, though? It goes back to what you're talking about, the caucuses, that's why sometimes I wonder about these big conspiracy theories. I'm like, how do people... Right? How do people coordinate when they can't even do it on a local level? It's so damn messy.
Oh, I know, right? Actually, I have said that before. I was like, I mean, like, I am a Democrat. I am with my party, but like, I was like, I'm sorry, like, you think the Democrats are well organized enough to plan a pandemic? Okay. No, which is a terrible thing to say, but like, people were saying things like that. And it's like, no, like, the organization level is lacking, and also it's crazy, but no, you're right. Like, who can plan that?
I don't think you can ever solve that problem. I think at the end of the day, people are going to do what they're going to do. And, a lot of times organizing that, and, the moment you get forces within either party try to organize things, you're going to experience a chain reaction of rebellion. So I think that's been very common in both the left and the right, and the left is with Bernie, and in the right it was with Trump. So, it's like, you can't, not everything can fit in a box, which is really fascinating to watch the politics of the last, maybe like 6 years.
And that's what's so fascinating in terms of people not being able to fit into boxes. I think of people who are, may vote Republican, but then they'll hear about like some of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's policies or a few of Bernie's policies, and they'll support it. Or, people who flipped from Obama to Trump, people who have strongly held positions that kind of span the spectrum. And it's honestly, it's interesting because I think more so than in previous election cycles, like these past 2 cycles, we saw a lot of flipping around that was just, it led, I think, party strategists to do a lot of scrambling to kind of catch up. And God knows there's a reason I don't do campaigns. My boyfriend, bless him, has run a lot of campaigns in the past. And I could not do it. I am more of a policy person, and I will help anyone on advocacy as much as they need, but campaigns are just a separate animal altogether.
So is your boyfriend also a Democrat?
Yes.
Okay.
I have only dated one Republican in my life. And actually, it was an interesting time in my life because it was in the run up to the 2008 election. And he was like convinced that Romney was going to win. And I knew that that was probably not the case. That was back when elections were more predictable,
Right.
when the polls
Right.
ended up being correct, and you know, but yeah, no, I've mostly dated within my own party.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's fascinating. But how was that mixed relationship? I want to hear that. Thanks, Jennifer, for opening up that can of worms, right? But
I
I
love
want to hear like
conversations
how
like
It,
this.
awkward was
it, I mean, we have people who are cutting off their family members because they voted for Trump or they supported this candidate or that candidate. So, it's a natural conversation.
It really is, and it's so hard. I mean, what I think, and I am, I'll say lucky that in that my family, I come from a family that was sort of moderate New England Republicans, and then my father left the Republic. Well, my mother actually was never a Republican, but my father left the Republican Party because he didn't like Reagan's social conservatism. And over the
Mm.
years, like he's become a registered Democrat, and my mother, they both, stayed loyal to the Democratic Party. They vote like literally every election, do campaign stuff, and but they were sort of on different pages when they first started, but now pretty much my entire family, at least is like, fairly like moderate to liberal. And so I can't personally relate to having somebody who is completely opposite to me and my own family, but I spent a lot of time on Reddit because, the pandemic. And I've been to the QAnon casualties subreddit quite a bit. And what I think the line is for people, and what I think it would be for me if this were the case, is if somebody started like embracing conspiracy theories and just acting irresponsibly and acting violently, or just like, engaging in behavior that made you feel unsafe. I mean, I think that it is healthy and normal to have different views within a family. And it is, I truly believe you can always find common ground. There's this guy who I've been interacting with a lot on Twitter who's a Republican, and we both love The Bachelor. Guilty pleasure, I'm embarrassed to say that, but like we talk about that, and like, so things like that. And within families, like, you can always find some sort of activity or memory to connect around. But I think the line is conspiracy theories, or just behavior that makes you concerned for yourself or for anyone else in the family. But I cannot speak from personal experience on
Okay.
this, but a lot of people are going through that. And I kind of go between feeling like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy, like, you can't cut somebody off, but then also understanding cases where somebody has to sort of look out for their own well-being, or like, if it's a case of like, I read a lot of stories on this subreddit about somebody whose, husband or wife will suddenly start, just start acting in a way that's just not rational. And like, I understand that. So it's
So
eye-opening.
here is my problem with that. What is rational? Because
So
you have people who legitimately believe that the election, not necessarily that Trump won, but that there was malfeasance in the election process in their area. And there is a sector of the population that says, no, you're just crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. But right now, Maricopa County, Arizona is going through a full on audit of the election
Yes.
because they found enough irregularities for that to be the case. So,
I so
how do you
my
explain it?
And you're correct. Rational is absolutely a subjective term. Like I think
Exactly.
of rational as being like science, and but at the same time, it is something that people define differently. I would say, if you are espousing a belief that evidence has repeatedly shown, like, scientific proof, or like multiple results of multiple different audits, if there is just repeated evidence to disprove your belief, then I would say that that's not rational. So, but I mean, really, mainly what I'm referring to are like, people who thought that Donald Trump was going to be inaugurated for a second term on March 4th. And people descended on DC again. Oh my God. Um, things like that, where there's just very, very just mountains of proof to the contrary. So that would be that's my definition for rational. And I understand that it looks different for everyone, but that would be where I would draw that line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I mean, we also have a certain aspect of the media that is pushing a certain narrative. And if we move into, moving away a little bit from politics to some of the local stuff that's going on, the shooting of Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio.
Heartbreaking, awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heartbreaking situation. However, and the immediate knee jerk is, oh, another, white cop is killing Black people. They're attacking us. And now that the video cam footage has come out, that officer is a hero. He was saving the life of another young woman by shooting this woman who was wielding a knife and getting ready to strike with a knife. So you have a lot of the media that are more interested in narrative and agenda than they are about actual facts coming out and allowing facts to come out as they should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm careful about the media that I understand, like it's so funny because like I've been frustrated by the media myself as somebody who's left leaning, but who found that there were, like, I was frustrated with the New York Times for example, after 2016, when they did like think piece after think piece about Trump support, like former Obama supporters who went to Trump, and that just got frustrating. So I mean, I think that, at the end of the day, there are really, I think, wonderful journalists out there who, and I have a lot of friends who are journalists, so I may be biased, but there are people out there who are really just trying to, do their job at the end of the day. But then there are absolutely, there are clickbaity headlines, even in publications like the New York Times, when I'm like, come on, you guys, like, let's not act like, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has killed 1,000 people or something, like, it just things like that where I feel like their headlines could have been more responsive, but it's like, I understand that you're looking for clicks. So, I see you, but you're right. And I think that, the media can be frustrating, and I try to just, I try to I read the Washington Post quite a bit. I tend to really trust their reporting. If I look for like more of a right-leaning perspective that I think is still high quality journalism, I'll read the Wall Street Journal from time to time. So I do try to sort of expose myself to different viewpoints. Like, I'm definitely conscious of living in kind of a liberal bubble, and I am interested in hearing views from others. But yeah, I think that I mean, I think that people on both sides of the aisle have expressed frustration with the media's tendencies. And
let me jump in because I just experienced this. So Jennifer was one of the media that was on my Asian American press conference to call out action from, there's latest news. The Democrats and Biden have passed a bill, which is protect agents. So I believe that we had a part to do with that because, we had that press conference and called for that action and made national news. Now, what was very interesting, though, was the coverage. And I have to blast both Washington Post and Fox News for this, because our press conference was probably 50% focused on law and order and calls for that. And Jennifer certainly covered it very well. She covered that aspect of it. But guess what Fox and WAPO both did is they just took sound bites of it and tried to tie it into a narrative about Republicans cynically using the Asian attacks to push an anti-affirmative action agenda, which was one of our items. And, so it was very fascinating to watch. I was not surprised with Washington Post because, unlike you, I do think they're very biased. Okay. And, but, they put out their bias, which was to be expected. But what was shocking was that Fox piled on because Fox wanted to be part of the food fight. And they knew it was clickbaity. And so they went in that and didn't report the other 50 to 75% of our press conference, which I found very fascinating.
That's really unfortunate.
Red meat with left or right. all about red meat rather than
Regrettably, yeah.
nuances in
Yeah.
a story. That frankly are
Yeah.
more fascinating. I remember that I'm from Chicago, and so as far as I'm concerned, I consider myself from a real journalism town.
Yeah.
If Washington skipped to New York, Chicago is the real town.
Right.
Some of the best writers, Roy Coe, and all of those guys. And one of the things that Tribune and Sun Times used to do is, and some of the writers do, John Cass does it, several of the other writers will do it, follow a story throughout, not just abandon it, not just throw up a headline and then you never hear from it again.
Right.
Follow the story throughout, follow the aspects of that story. Not just the aspects that suit your narrative, the aspects that are puzzling or are troubling or don't fit the narrative.
Absolutely.
I don't see that anymore. It's always about a certain thing and a certain,
right. And that's how I felt about Atlanta,
Oh,
with the shooter. We missed an opportunity to have a conversation about sex addiction.
Yeah.
And we certainly did. Jennifer, we brought Tamara on episode 2. So check out episode 2. We talked about that at length.
Podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, there were
and Lydia
so many
herself
issues at play there.
is a sex addict, right? So,
I am not.
Oh,
I'm not.
sorry.
Oh my God. No way. You just seamlessly. I swear, this is why you're in politics. The easy insertion of the lie, just smoothly transitioning to the very untrue fact.
Gary.
I should not I am obviously committed to, I want to see for people who are struggling with conditions like that, clearly addiction is an illness and I want to see people get help for that. I want to see more support for I think actually one thing that people in both parties agree on is more funding for mental health services.
Oh yeah.
And after it just seems to be one thing that people can agree on. So I do think that is important. Though this is not a challenge
my question. Yeah. Why does everything come down to funding? Particularly because we waste so much money. There has been billions of dollars in Los Angeles alone spent on homelessness.
Yeah.
Buying tents for people and buying pop-up. I just finished a story about Dr. Drew Pinsky, who, he was a celebrity love doctor. That's how he got his name. But he is actually still a practicing internist. He has health background. He's a smart man, and he talks about valid answers to the homelessness problem that don't require you pouring a ton of money into it anymore.
Amen.
Bringing back some more laws, like actually treating people as opposed to letting them go around and do whatever they want to. So he's talked about these things publicly for quite some time, over a year. He was nominated by Catherine Barger, who is a board of supervisor in Los Angeles, for a homeless commission that they're a 10-person commission that they're mounting in Los Angeles to, again, solve the homeless problem. Homeless activists reamed him upside downside on Twitter, Facebook, because, his ideas are toxic. And, he's just a celebrity doctor. He's nobody. And basically, Catherine Barger withdrew his nomination. Someone who had solid answers that no one else had. I mean, these people have been doing that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result.
Yeah.
Pouring money, doing these programs, doing that program, and none of these people have ever solved the problem. Why are they even called homeless activists? Why is anybody paying them money? But this man who is not in it for money and has some solid answers and solid solutions that could be implemented, and they're medical solutions, and he gets ripped apart and tossed out.
That's so sad.
This seems to be the way. The answer always seems to be more funding, as opposed to, why don't you bring some credible people who can take the funding you already have and use it differently.
Amen.
Yeah, and I mean, in some cases, there is a need for more funding, but it does need to be allotted, and there needs to be more accountability over how it's spent. And absolutely, there need to be policy changes sometimes too. I mean, when you're talking about medical solutions for people who struggle with homelessness, most people, I've been doing some work with a client this past year, the Minority Psychology Network. They're amazing. And I've learned a lot about mental health challenges, including, the fact that most people who are homeless have, have some sort of, a lot of them have mental health conditions.
Yeah.
And so you cannot ignore that aspect of it. And they're also, I mean, obviously to fix homelessness is the kind of thing that requires a multifaceted solution. We need a greater supply of housing. But it's not like you can never just throw money at a problem. And like
Amen.
it's
But that's
valid.
what we have been doing
Yeah,
for.
and that's
I've been
that's
in Los Angeles for over 30 years, and that is what has been
well,
Mhm.
happening.
it's
Throwing
literally
money
never
at
helpful to throw money at a problem. It is all about having the right people involved to, and I think that also when you're trying to create when you're coming up with a solution for something, for again like a problem like homelessness, you do need people from different parts of, like, the best commissions like that I think are comprised of people from a variety of different backgrounds who have different sets of expertise, who, and the mental health and like the mental health and the healthcare community in general absolutely need representations on panels like that. I
Mhm.
honestly know very little about Dr. Drew's background other than like the fact that he was on TV, but I think that I don't think you should ever discount somebody just because they're famous. Look at their actual credentials and the fact that he's still a practicing internist. I did not know that. That is impressive.
Yeah, it is
It
very
seems
impressive.
so. I
Patient,
mean,
does all his shows and appearances, but no patient complaints as far as I can tell. So
Mhm.
he's
that's
Yeah.
great.
he's a credible human being who was immediately made, lacked
Yeah.
credibility.
And
Based
I think the reason why is because so many people are beholden and their lives are tied, their livelihood is tied to getting paid by a lot of these bloated
yes,
agencies.
yes.
So that's why if there's any change, it threatens them,
Mhm.
and they react violently and very harshly. And I saw this definitely with our fight for charter schools here, in Orange County, where the approval of a very simple charter school threatened so many people that we had like dozens of older women in black shirts rabble rouse the Department of Education meeting. I will never forget what happened that night, and that meeting went till 2 a.m. I said, these people are
Oh
really
gosh.
invested, because they can't just handle another thing in the market to provide school choice and education, that if our public schools are failing, so let's give them other alternatives. I mean, to me it's a no-brainer, but this is what's happening, especially with the homelessness issue. Jennifer, I'm so glad you brought it up, because here in California we put so much money into homelessness, and yet the problem is not getting solved. It's just getting exacerbated, and there's more and more homeless, it seems like, every day. Like you drive around downtown Los Angeles and a new enclave has popped up. It's amazing. It's like I didn't know that you could.
And here is the battle
Mhm.
between, and this is a Democrat Republican thing, definitely, between private property rights and individual rights, and the rights of, you know of other people to infringe on that.
Mhm.
We've got homeless people. This happened in Santa Monica, and unfortunately, Santa Monica caved, and it's spreading elsewhere. But people setting up encampments on your front lawn,
Right.
or in your back, in your alleyway. It's like, and the
Yes.
government refuses to do anything about it, even though it is your private property, even though you should have a right to that safety on your private property.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's something that is being disregarded, and more laws and more catering is done to the
Yeah.
homeless rather than for the
Yeah,
homeless
Lydia, what are your
person who
thoughts
pays
on that?
taxes.
I mean, I think that again, to me, this points to government inaction. I mean, I have so much sympathy for people who are homeless. I want to do anything in my power to help them. And but I think that the government, I mean, in a situation like that, when somebody is going onto somebody's private property, I also understand why that would make somebody feel very unsafe. And it's like, why is I think that this points to the government's need to do more to well, not, and again, like, not just to fund these programs, but to incorporate people, leaders, stakeholders from multiple different sectors to really sit down and address this to
Mhm.
and honestly, housing policy is something that I've recently begun to learn a little bit more about. I'm more of like an
Okay.
education and health person, but as somebody who has worked on education and health issues, I mean, housing, and all of these issues are so tightly intertwined, and you need people from multiple different sectors to
But that's
address
just the
this from
problem, Lydia. You have a lot of cronyism when it comes to these committees. So these committees are being
that.
created.
Yeah.
They will get homeless, a task force or this and that. But
Yeah.
who do they pick? There's no diversity. There's no diversity of thought. It's all about cronyism and like, okay, well, we can't have this Republican on it because they're gonna and then I was talking to a friend of mine who actually has a nonprofit dedicated to homelessness and to do affordable housing, which is one of the solutions.
Oh, awesome. So important.
And one of the things that she said to me was she had a conversation with a Democratic state lawmaker here. And that Democratic state lawmaker, I cannot say their name, whispered to her and said, I'll tell you a dirty secret. We don't want to solve the homelessness problem.
Nothing.
I mean,
we know
that's so
that.
sad.
We know. We see.
I do think there are people in both parties who have no real interest in fixing issues, and that's really awful. And like, regardless of what party somebody is in who said something like that, they don't deserve to hold public office. That's not, and I understand. I mean, it again, like, I understand that it's obviously a difficult issue to solve, but I think that I think that you should go into public. And again, like, I'm not saying this is why everybody goes into public office, but I do know that there are people out there who run for office and serve an elected office because they genuinely want to help people. And
how do we help
want
those
to solve
people
problems
in, Lydia? Regardless of party, how do we help get people like that in? Because I know a lot of great people, they don't want to run for
Right.
office.
And not only help them get in, but this is what I also hear about those good people who immediately go into office. Actually, Tulsi Gabbard made a point of this, that they immediately try to dissect you from caring. They immediately want to dump you into this swamp mentality of, this is what the agenda is. What you care about, we don't care about.
And Lydia, you were a Tulsi groupie, right? During the...
I was not. Oh my God, I am not. No, I have a lot of issues, but no. So in terms of getting people, Tulsi groupie, you are ridiculous. How many falsehoods have you told about me tonight? Drugs, sex, Tulsi Gabbard. That is,
they all go together.
The array. Oh my God, I know, right? I see that. But so in terms of, and I understand you do like when you are an elected official and you are part of a political party. I will say, actually, I think that some party leaders are better than others, and about understanding that sometimes, like, not every, and I actually think the Democrats have done a really good job of this in recent years. Nancy Pelosi, I know she is probably not any, your favorite. I know, I see the look on your face and I understand it, but she has done a very, very good job of keeping her party united. And the Democrats, ideologically speaking, are a very, very diverse party. And I mean, there are moderate Democrats, there are very, very liberal Democrats. There's a really wide spectrum. And I think that Nancy Pelosi does a wonderful job of recognizing that. And, she gives AOC, what she wants sometimes, but also helps, but also caters to the more moderate wing. She does a really good job of, providing political cover if you need to take a vote that goes against the rest of the party. But ultimately, they stay pretty united because she's good at listening to people and understanding when you need political cover to do something, and not just demanding blind loyalty, which is...
Well, Susan Collins is better, just so you know.
I know you love her. We've had this conversation so many times. He loves Susan Collins very much. Jennifer's probably heard him wax poetic about her too.
Actually, I have not. And
he loves Susan Collins, my home state.
About Susan Collins, she votes who she is, and that's for. You know what? I got no problem with that. She doesn't lie about who she is.
Right. She's very consistent.
I have to know exactly where we stand with Susan Collins, so I can.
And I actually appreciate, again, like, I appreciate people in both parties who are like that, who are not afraid to be, a little, to just vote their conscience on certain issues. And it's it can be hard, and you take the hate, but you know what, you deal with it. And I think that I've had my issues with her. I did not actually, I haven't voted in Maine in years. I was frustrated when she won re-election, but I also, I
Why would you
are you
expect her not?
gloating?
Why would you expect her not
gloating.
to win re-election?
I did
We all
not.
know that incumbents generally.
I was and Maine is extremely loyal to its politicians. I'm not.
It is.
I wasn't. I wasn't really surprised. I was kind of frustrated, but I mean, she had her strongest opponent in years, and that still wasn't enough. And I talked to my parents who they voted for Gideon, her opponent, but they had neighbors who were kind of like, middle of the road types who voted for Collins, who voted for, I think, who voted for Biden, but who voted for Collins. And it's Maine is extremely loyal to its politicians, and it's really, really it is an interesting state, just in terms of its political mix and its quirks. And I think New England, New Hampshire's kind of like this too. They're not necessarily, it's hard to fit them into one box,
And that's what's fascinating about your aunt, who
my cousin. Yeah. My
cousin,
father's third cousin, super distant relative.
Yeah, who is Rep Ann McLean Custer, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she represents New Hampshire 2nd District. And
Yeah.
what it fascinates is that district is actually more Republican than the 1st District, but she keeps winning re-election because I think of, she's created this image of being moderate to her.
Yeah. And she has done a really good job of identifying issues that are important to the district. And
Right.
I think that's what smart politicians in both parties do. Honestly, just politicians who are looking out for the best interests of their district. They need to be, they know that they need to know their district and know what their priorities are. And,
so Lydia, I want to ask you this, okay? Because I think, there's a lot of homogenous populations, especially in New Hampshire 2nd or Maine, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
We here in California have very diverse districts with multiple ethnic groups lumped into, say, like California 39th District, where I do most of my events. And, right now the representative is Young Kim. It's considered a swing district. We had a Democrat representing it. So how is that when you have, because the average congressman now represents about 750,000 people, I think. And that's a lot of people. You can have multiple worlds of people that don't even interact with each other. And I think you and I both were in New York. So New York districts are very similar in that regard as well.
Yeah.
Because the needs of Upper East Side and Spanish Harlem are very, very different.
Absolutely.
How do we solve this issue here?
I mean, my God, that is a that is a rather tall order. I mean, it's about listening to stakeholders from each key community and really making an effort to, if you're an elected official, and their staff obviously play a huge role in this. Congressional staff are in a lot of ways the best kept, hardest working secret in the world. I mean, and it's about listening and being responsive to constituent needs. One thing
isn't it beyond that though? I think we have the problem that you've mentioned also is apathy. So, Jennifer had mentioned this. Her and I have had a lot of conversations about this, about how apathetic Californians are in general.
Right.
I think even the East Coast in New York, they're much more politically engaged than they are out here, which we're 3,000, 4,000 miles from DC. I mean, some people don't even know the difference between federal and state out here. That's the type of people voting. Yeah. I worry about that. And I worry about Democrats always pushing, let's rock the vote. Everyone vote, when you have a bunch of dumbasses that have no clue what the issues are.
You see that in red states too, actually. You definitely see that in red states. You see that in every state, unfortunately. To me, it speaks to limitations in civics education and I
We
mean,
need a
God only
civics
knows what
test.
else,
But
but
these are limitations in civics educations that the DEA and our teachers unions pushed, and those
what
are staunchly Democrat.
Yeah, it's
oh,
crazy.
I don't necessarily think that
Oh,
that's the root of,
they
I mean, it's a
are.
I mean, and
They are.
I don't know. I mean, there are multiple, I would speak more to like a lack of funding I mean, the way that education is funded is a huge part of it. And this is like a whole other conversation, but in terms of
Yeah,
addressing
we should have that
apathy,
conversation another
I
time.
would say, yeah, absolutely. And I would say in terms of apathy, it's hard to, it's hard to help people understand why they should care about something. And I mean, I think that I mean, like when I talk to people who want to like about getting involved in advocacy, I think, just you ask yourself, like, what do you care about? Like, what do you wish the government knew about you? What do you wish that the government could understand about like what you need and how they could help make your life better? And what I think is actually, and I understand like frustrations that people have with the government. Like I think we all have them. And there are ways like we don't live in a perfectly representative system of democracy, but
Of course.
I tell people, and this is what I would always tell people before, like during advocacy trainings, or just if they were thinking about like getting involved in the advocacy process at any level, like your elected officials are there to listen to you, and they're more accessible than you might think. I mean, like when I
Good
worked on the
point.
Hill, and well, yeah, like, and like, like when you came into that Hill day and like you and I met up and like I helped you with like, so we talked about some of your target offices, and
Mhm.
you were able to have these really, really productive meetings with people, again, like with like staffers of lawmakers in both parties, where you guys had long and really like productive conversations that led to like I think some real working relationships on your part, right, with some of those
Mhm.
offices.
Yep.
But like the fact that you were able to, and I think it was like a last minute trip too, wasn't it? And you were
Right.
able to get meetings pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And and even like people like there were a couple of people who, like when I worked on the Hill, I would take meetings sometimes with people on a slow day who would just walk in, and I would talk with
Mm.
them, and we would have a conversation about whatever they needed. Like, and it's it's not always that easy, but you can very often just like walk into someone's office or schedule a meeting and you know get your message at least
Yeah.
like
And let me also segue that into the districts. In your district, there should be a person, a staffer in the district that you can contact. Usually
yeah.
you can get it from house.gov, right? And you can find who that person is. And people don't take advantage of that. So for citizen concerns, like let's say here, we have a lot of people that have immigration issues, like go talk to your congressman and have them help you through that process. That is
Yeah.
a not often used resource.
Oh, it's amazing what these people, the district staff, are able to do. I mean, I was always just in awe of it because when I was in DC and I was like working on the policy side of things, and I was the one who was identifying which bills we should, like doing vote recs and identifying which bills we should co-sponsor, et cetera. But up in the district office, they would help get people access to social security benefits. They would help people, get their veterans benefits sorted out. They
Right.
had a remarkable array of services that they were able to
Mhm.
provide. And it's true. And they are able to be a resource to you. And like sometimes issues where people wouldn't even know where to turn otherwise, they would start with their congressional office. Like I remember one case where somebody like needed a copy of their high school diploma, or something like that. It was just,
Oh.
issues like that. And they would call, and the woman who was the district manager for casework, just, she helped everybody. And really, it's
Mhm.
the kind of thing that, it's what these offices are here to do. And I think I agree. I think a lot of people don't understand, just don't know that they're there.
Yeah. And we want to bring you on in the future to talk about these things. I mean, we're running out of time right now,
Yeah.
but
Oh my gosh. The time
yeah,
flew by. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
we
Does
just
fly by. It really
yeah.
does.
But we'll have Jennifer wrap things up, and let's let's keep this conversation open. There's a lot to talk about. I want to get into race actually with you one of these
Oh, good Lord.
days. Let's talk.
I mean, in only an hour. I mean,
yeah, I know, right? You can write a book on it.
I would love to. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation. Obviously, like as a white woman, I bring my own.
You're white?
It's. I mean, it is the kind of thing where I want to, I'm here to listen, and I want to have these conversations, and uncomfortable as they can get sometimes. I would love to have them.
Uncomfortable. And
exactly.
We're trying to make everything comfortable when these are supposed to be uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's it's awkward.
There's a pose in yoga where we talk about finding that place of uncomfortable discomfort.
Yes,
it's not
that's exactly
but that's what's gonna get that stretch. That's what's gonna open that hip, but it's not going to necessarily be pleasant. So
that's the only way to grow.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
It has been a lovely and delightful conversation and an informative conversation. Join us again for the Red Beans and Fried Rice podcast. I'll get that right one of these days. Red Beans and Fried Rice podcast. We are on SoundCloud, on YouTube, and we're trying to get to other places so that you can catch us. But we send
Don't forget our Twitter and our Facebook.
Yes,
what is it? Red Bean Fried R1?
Yep, Red Beans Fried R1 on Twitter. Red Beans and Fried Rice podcast on Twitter, on Facebook. And of course, individually, you can find me as The Girl Turns on Facebook, Twitter,
and me on aib2b.org. You'll see all this stuff we're doing. We're making a lot of noise on press. LA Times is going to cover our next event, so check that out pretty soon.
Nice. And Lydia, where can they find you and all of your wisdom?
So you can find me at my website, lydiafhall.com. It's LYDIA, F as in Frank, HALL.com. lydiafhall.com. And all the links to my social are there. So if you want to connect that way, feel free. I'm always happy to chat. Having me, you guys are awesome. And I love the little cross-aisle conversation.
And you can also find Jennifer on
redstate.com.
Red State. I love Red State.
I am sure you do.
Yeah.
I think,
and I guess
too, even if you don't agree with anything that's on there.
And I think that I mean they're a big deal. Like it's a platform it's a big platform. It's impressive.
Yeah.
And great,
but it
because
also
of
has
great
a lot of quality writers who are diverse and interesting, and we don't always agree on everything either. Great evening, Lydia. Thank you for hanging with us so late, and sorry
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me. I am looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
Absolutely. We'll bring you back on.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Take care.
Night. Bye.